Hi guys, so it's me, Elizabeth again, and I know I have not updated in a very long time. Things just progressed as they do with pregnancy, and I had a baby. So I'm going to go ahead and share with you my labor and delivery story. I guess just a teeny bit of background as far as the end of my pregnancy. Everything went really smooth. I didn't have any issues with my blood pressure. I didn't have any issues with my blood sugar. I didn't really have any issues at all. Everything was going appropriately. My weight gain was appropriate. My belly was measuring appropriately. And the only thing I had is I had some swelling. I had some pitting edema in my ankles and lower legs that kind of came pretty swiftly on and would get much worse when I worked. Obviously, I am a labor and delivery nurse, which I don't think I've ever officially said on this channel. I've more alluded to. I'm a labor and delivery nurse. I delivered on the unit that I work on. So I work 12-hour shifts, and walking and things like that, and being on my feet a lot with those 12-hour shifts, my swelling would get a lot worse. I was wearing compression stockings, which were helping some, but they were very hot. So that was kind of my big major pregnancy complaint at the end of pregnancy, which in the grand scheme of things is like not a bad pregnancy at all. But yeah, so that's kind of where I was when I went in for my 39-week appointment. And I was up 34 pounds from my pre-pregnancy weight, and I was measuring, I believe, at 37 or 38 weeks with my fundal height. She had dropped, which was good. My cervix was 1 to 2 centimeters dilated. I was 80% effaced and between -1 and 0 station, so she was pretty low in there. She was in a pretty good starting place at my 39-week appointment, and so the doctor went ahead and stripped my membranes. And when they do that, the doctor basically takes their finger and goes inside of your cervix and sweeps their finger around to separate the wall of your uterus from the membranes. This is going to release a ton of prostaglandins, and it is going to help you hopefully go into labor. Some people find this very uncomfortable. For me, it just felt like a very aggressive vaginal check. I didn't think that it was uncomfortable at all, and the doctor said I was a real trooper afterwards. I don't know if he was just saying that because he was being nice or if I actually was, but he said he did a pretty aggressive sweep and that hopefully something would happen fairly soon. So he did that on a Wednesday because that's when my weeks turned over. And then after that I had some spotting, some contractions, nothing very painful at all, but just tightening of my uterus that I noticed, and you know, there was a little bit of a pattern to it, but I could talk through it. I didn't need to breathe through it. It was nothing intense. Like I said, a little bit of vaginal bleeding. And then that kind of all petered out. I went to work that Wednesday after they did my sweep, and I also worked that Thursday night. And so, you know, things would pick up while I was working, but then I would be able to sleep and they'd kind of die down. Friday, I started losing my mucus plug, which really means a whole heck of a lot of nothing. If you lose your mucus plug, you could have your baby later that day. You could have your baby a week or so from then. And so losing your mucus plug isn't that big of a deal. And I was like, oh, whatever, you know, he was up and around in there. So that's just kind of what I figured was part of the having my membranes swept. And I didn't think I was going to go into labor because typically with the membrane sweep, it tends to have worked by 48 hours. And so I was on Friday, it was 48 hours from when I had it done. And so I was having some contractions again, but this is the end of pregnancy. You should expect to have contractions as long as you're able to breathe through them, or not breathe through them, as long as you're able to talk through them and they're not, you know, they can be uncomfortable, but you know, expect it, especially with your first baby, to just keep on power through it, because you know, if you go in when you can talk through your contractions, more than likely you're going to be sent home from the hospital. Anyway, so I'm losing my mucus plug all day. Didn't really think anything of it except for it was gross. It's like really thick snot. I did not take a picture, although I wish I had. It was gross, and it was a little bit bloody tinged, which again is totally normal. If you ever have questions about how much vaginal bleeding is too much bleeding, it is always a good idea to call your doctor. Better to be safe than sorry, but a little bit of blood tinged mucus is 100% normal, especially as you get towards the end of pregnancy, and you're losing your mucus plug and you're dilating. And so that Friday night at 10:15, I felt a little gush of fluid in my underwear, and I thought, that's weird. I wonder if I broke my water. So I looked at my underwear. They were damp, but it wasn't like a continual flow. I went to the bathroom. I tried to kind of push a little bit more out. Nothing came. I coughed a few times. Nothing else came. So that's what we have patients do when we're unsure if their water's broken. To see if we can get a little bit more fluid to come. What was in my underwear was clear, so I called my OB and spoke with them and said, hey, my water might have broken, nothing in the world is happening, so, and it's clear. I was also group B strep negative, so I didn't need antibiotics, and so I went ahead and spoke with my OB, and she said it was fine for me to stay home for 12 hours and come in at the 12-hour mark if nothing had happened. So if it had been during the day, I would have gotten up and I would have walked and I would have tried to get labor going. But it was 10 p.m. at night, and I knew that if things didn't start by themselves, I was going to have a long day ahead of me, so I got some sleep. That was the last full night of sleep that I have had, so that was a good thing. So this was all happening on this was all happening on May 6th. And so yeah, I went to bed. We woke up the next morning. I was having contractions, and they were fairly regular, but again, I could talk through them. I could walk through them. They didn't stop me at all, and they were a little bit more uncomfortable, maybe a 2 out of 10 if we're rating our pain, but nothing I would have gone in for, nothing I would have called the doctor for, nothing that told me that labor was really getting started. So I went out to breakfast with my husband. We came home, we packed our bags, and we headed to the hospital. When I got to the hospital, everything looked good. My vital signs were all normal. The baby's heartbeat was perfect. My pulse was a little bit elevated. It was in, I think, the low 100s, but that was the only thing that was slightly abnormal. My temperature and everything was totally fine. And I got my cervix rechecked, and I was the same. So they went ahead, and because my water was broken, and I was at risk for getting an infection, and I had already kind of gone 12 hours and nothing had happened. A vast majority of people will go into labor within 12 hours after their water breaks. Most people, like the rest of that not vast majority, are going to go into labor within 24 hours after their water breaks. But the issue with waiting that long is that you are super susceptible to infection because that last barrier that's protecting the baby is gone. And so most OBs are going to want you to do something to get labor started after the 12-hour mark. Some might even before, so obviously check with yours. But so they went ahead and we were going to start Pitocin. Pitocin is the synthetic form of oxytocin, which is the hormone that your body produces to simulate labor, or stimulate labor rather. Pitocin, people think that it makes your labor much stronger and makes contractions much more unbearable. Now that I've been on Pitocin, I can verify that that is true in the sense that things go from 0 to 60 pretty quickly, but you would have to get to 60 to go into labor, to have a baby. So the Pitocin makes things stronger faster and doesn't give you that natural progression that a normal labor would have, that you would be more able to deal with your contractions, but it doesn't make them stronger than they would eventually be. It just gets them to that point sooner. They started an IV, and you're on a pump with the Pitocin, so you've got the pump on an IV pole, and you have to be on a monitor because, again, it is a high alert drug. It can make your uterus go into like a continual contraction, and which would not be safe for the baby, and some babies aren't going to tolerate labor, and since we're augmenting it with the Pitocin, you have to be on the monitor. I am fortunate enough that I was able to be on the portable telemetry monitor. which meant that I was able to still walk the halls, I was able to get in the tub, all of those wonderful things while they were able to safely and effectively monitor my contractions and monitor my baby's heart rate. Not all hospitals have this, and not all bellies do well with the portable monitor. Sometimes people with the portable monitor, every time they move, the baby comes off the monitor, and that's not safe. So ideally with Pitocin, we do want you up and moving. We want you to be on that portable monitor, but it doesn't always work, and not all hospitals have that option. But fortunately for me, I was able to have that. So they started the Pitocin at, let me see, I have my notes over here. So they started the Pitocin at 1 p.m. I had gotten to the hospital at around 11, and they started it at 2 milliunits per minute. I only got up to 4 milliunits per minute. That was my dose of Pitocin the whole time. That's all my body needed, was just a teeny tiny little, like, teeny little kick just to get me started. With Pitocin, the goal is obviously for the baby to tolerate labor and to have contractions every 2 to 3 minutes, lasting 60 to 90 seconds with a good resting tone in between, and make sure your belly's nice and soft in between. So that's the goal. So I'm out walking the halls, my husband and I are talking, laughing, listening to music. We downloaded a book on tape to listen to, and it was 2:30 at that point. Having contractions, they were very consistent every 2 to 3 minutes. They were feeling pretty moderate to palpation. It was uncomfortable, but I was still able to talk through them. I was still able to, sorry, the baby might be over here. I was still able to move through them. I might have to pause and kind of breathe through them, but it was nothing crazy. Our plan was to keep walking the halls until 3, and then maybe try the birthing ball, try some other things. At 2:30, I had a crazy strong contraction. This was the start of the crazy strong contractions, and I said, we need to go in the room. I got in the room, I tried sitting on the birthing ball. Everything was super uncomfortable. I was just, I don't even know how to explain where it was hurting, but just that it hurt a lot. It was like my belly, I guess some in my back. I wouldn't call it a true back labor because it was like kind of a tightness everywhere. And so I went and got in the tub at that point, and I requested fentanyl. Fentanyl is an IV medication that they can give you as long as labor is not, or as long as delivery is not imminent. It's in and out of your system in about an hour. So that's what they can give at our hospital. That's not an epidural, kind of like an intermediate step between nothing and an epidural. It did nothing. It did not touch the contraction pain. And at this point, it was probably, it was around 3. We got out of the tub. I said I want an epidural. I was checked by my nurse, and I was only 3 centimeters dilated, which was very disappointing to me. I wanted to be further dilated before I got my epidural. I was planning on getting one, but I really wanted to be about 6 centimeters dilated. The research shows that that is a good time to get an epidural because you are well within active labor and things are moving. But I was 3 centimeters, I was on Pitocin, I couldn't get comfortable. I could get in the tub, which was great, but I couldn't use the jets in the tub because of the portable monitor. So the tub really wasn't doing it for me. At this point, while we waited for the anesthesiologist to come give me my epidural, I was on hands and knees on the bed, and my husband with the contractions was squeezing my hips and rubbing my back, providing counter pressure, which was helping some. At this point, I was kind of losing my cool. Okay, so my camera battery died, and then we woke up, we had a big poopy diaper, we changed that, and had a little snack, and now we're back. So anyway, like I was saying, I reacted to labor as I thought I would, not gracefully, with a lot of cursing, things that I was kind of hoping to do at home. My plan had been to labor at home for as long as possible and then go into the hospital when I was ready for my epidural. The Pitocin having to augment my labor kind of put a wrench in that plan. But yeah, so I got my epidural at 4, so it took about an hour from asking for the epidural to be complete and in my back and good to go. Getting the epidural was totally fine, no issues at all, like so super easy. They have you sit at the edge of the bed and kind of curl up like a shrimp and push out the lower part of your back. They numb everything up with lidocaine. Some people say that that's very painful. I didn't feel it at all, which kind of helped reassure me that even though I was only 3 centimeters dilated, like, I was really uncomfortable, and getting the epidural was the right thing to do because I didn't even feel the lidocaine go into my back. And we tell people that that feels like a large bee sting. And I didn't feel anything. So I got my epidural. I had a little bit of an issue with having pain still on my left hip. And they were able to kind of bolus my epidural a few times and get that under control. So I just got 1 epidural. I didn't have to get that replaced, which was wonderful. At about 5:30 after getting my epidural, I felt rectal pressure, like I needed to push, like I was fully dilated. We let the doctor know, and because I had been ruptured for so long, he didn't want to check my cervix again. He wanted to kind of wait and let things go, which isn't a bad thing. When you have an epidural, you can kind of do what we call laboring down. So even if I had been fully dilated, when you have an epidural and you can tolerate it, it's great to just let your body keep pushing that baby down so you have less work to do when you're pushing. I checked my cervix at 7 because that's when the nurses were changing shifts, and to the doctor's surprise, because I really don't think he thought I was going to be anything, I was fully dilated and at +2 station, which was wonderful. It was time for me to go ahead and start pushing. They had put in a Foley catheter in my bladder to help drain that. You want to have a nice empty bladder so that the baby can continue to come down. You can't feel when you need to pee when you're in labor and with an epidural, and so they give you the catheter, which will also help you from having an over-distended bladder, which can be pretty dangerous as far as your bladder function. I started pushing. I pushed in the traditional position that you imagine, with holding your legs back and kind of curling around your baby. I pushed with a bar and pulling a sheet down. I pushed some on my side because she was coming down a little crooked. And yeah, so that's what we did. And I had to get another bolus in my epidural because that pain in my left hip was coming back. But after an hour and a half of pushing, this sweet little nugget was born. This is Marian Carter. So Marian is after my husband's grandmother, and then Carter is after my side of the family. It was my middle name before I got married, and so we gave her 2 good family names, and we're calling her May, M-A-E. And she was born, she was 8 pounds even. She was 20 inches long, and she was born at 8:46 p.m. What else about you, my love? What else about you? She came out and she cried, and she went straight up on my chest. With my labor and delivery, I did have 1 complication while I was pushing. I developed a fever. The maximum that my temperature got was like 38.9, I believe, which is pretty high. I also, my pulse, like I said, was elevated when I got there, and it was super elevated when I was pushing. Part of that was obviously exerting myself, but part of it was my infection. So I got 2 doses of antibiotics after she was delivered, but because I delivered vaginally, they did not see a need to continue the antibiotics. When she came out, she was also really warm, because obviously if you have a warm oven, you're going to have a warm bun. So she was a little toasty when she first came out. They checked her temperature a few times and it went down. They thought about doing blood cultures on her, but because she had no other symptoms of infection besides that fever that resolved itself, they didn't have to. Yeah. So that was her labor and delivery. I had a 2nd-degree tear, so they stitched that up. After I delivered her, I delivered the afterbirth. I didn't have to push or anything. It just kind of came out on its own. The doctor pressed on the top of my uterus, and it came out, and I didn't feel that at all. And they sent that to pathology because I did have a fever. And we just bonded for 2 hours. We breastfed, and she did great at that, and she was a little champ. And we were just so in love with her. And then at that 2-hour mark, I got up and tried to go to the bathroom, and I was unable to urinate. but my bleeding and everything looked good postpartum. So we went to the postpartum part of the unit and we snuggled in for the night. I was able to go to the bathroom eventually, which was good, but then the next morning my bleeding had picked up and my uterus was super high, and it's because I wasn't actually emptying my bladder, so they had to put a catheter in and out, called an in and out catheter, and drain my bladder, and they got a liter off of it, so that's a lot of fluid. But then after that I was able to go to the bathroom, no problem. My bottom, my vagina was a little bit swollen, but nothing crazy, and I was taking ibuprofen for pain after that. And just to help reduce that swelling, and using a warm squirt bottle and numbing spray on my bottom as well. Baby May continued to do really well with breastfeeding. It was very uncomfortable when we first started, but we got the hang of it and everything. It went really well. She did end up being a little bit jaundiced when we left the hospital. It wasn't super crazy. I think it was 8 at 24 hours, which was high risk, but nothing that they would treat at that moment. Like I said, she was coming down a little bit crooked, so she had a little bit of molding on her head and a little bruise as well, which definitely contributed to being jaundiced. When we went home and went back to the pediatrician, she was actually quite a bit more jaundiced, and we ended up having to use the Billy blanket. I'm going to do a video on that, just kind of what to expect with the Billy blanket and how that worked for us. A few other videos that you can expect from me. I am now 6 weeks postpartum while filming this, so baby May is 6 weeks old. I'm going to do a video on what to expect at your 6-week postpartum visit for a normal vaginal delivery, and I'm also going to do a nursery tour. I don't know if I'm going to do updates on us. I think there's tons of those on YouTube, and they're not all that unique to watch, but if you guys have any video requests, definitely leave them below. I'm going to go ahead and also leave kind of some pictures from her labor and delivery from when she was first born. Thank you guys so much for watching my labor and delivery story. I'm sorry it took so long to get filmed, but it's very hard to get things done with a newborn. I love her to death, but she doesn't like to sleep unless I'm holding her. But she's a very sweet girl, and we're very, very, very blessed to have her. So leave any questions or comments below. I'll do my best to answer them as I can. And thanks so much for watching. Bye, guys.